Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our session today. So my name is Caitlin, and I am super excited that you are taking some time this morning to join me and to join the rest of the students that we have on this call so we can do this activity together. So like I said, my name is Caitlin. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm coming at you from Supernova at Dalhousie University. So Supernova is a network member of Actua, and we do lots of STEM programming all year round. So we have camps that we do in the summer, and we also run workshops just like this one during the rest of the year. So for those of you who are maybe not familiar with what STEM is, STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So that's where we get the STEM from. And today we're going to be focusing mostly on science and technology. And we're going to get to see how these two areas can work together, how they can benefit each other, and how they can be used to improve research. So we also have Mackenzie joining us from Supernova this morning, and Mackenzie is just going to help me out by keeping an eye on the chat box and making sure that I don't miss anything. So both of us will be answering any questions that you might have. It's just going to depend on who sees it first. And we have a lot of students joining us today, which is awesome. And I'm so happy that you're all here. And I know that we also have some classes. So teachers, thank you for joining us with your students this morning. If you wouldn't mind, teachers, just sending a quick message in the chat, letting us know how many students you have tuning into the session, that would be much appreciated. Okay, so with that, we will be using the chat feature a lot today, and you all seem to have found the chat feature, so that's awesome. If you have questions, or if you have answers to my questions, or if you have comments that you want to share about what we're talking about, that's where you can put those in the chat, okay? If you have not found the chat, it should be on the right-hand side of your screen, but I think based on all the messages that are coming through, it's safe to assume lots of you can see that and you've tried out using it. So that's awesome. But I'm going to leave your audio and your video off. So I know that I saw a couple messages come through saying that you couldn't turn your audio on just because there are so many of us. We're going to leave your audio and we're going to leave your cameras off this morning, but do use that chat to share. But remember that we're going to try really hard to keep it on topic. Okay, so that's going to be really helpful for me, and that's going to be really helpful for everyone else, all of your peers that are on this call as well, so that we're not distracting each other. And then this is another way that we can just practice being respectful and showing each other respect. Okay, so again, try hard not to spam that chat, please. If it is getting off topic, or if we are seeing lots of spamming happening, we will have to turn the chat off. And I don't want to do that because I want you to have the opportunity to ask your questions and to answer my questions. So let's try to keep that on topic, okay? Finally, we're going to go until about 10:30 this morning. I will probably wrap up a little bit earlier than that. But if you do have to leave us early for whatever reason, just know that the session is being recorded. And so you will have an opportunity to watch it back later to see what you missed if you do have to go. Okay, I think that that is all of the housekeeping we have to do. I'm just going to take a quick scroll through the chat and make sure that I haven't missed any important questions. But again, let's try really hard not to spam this, okay? Yeah, so if you have to leave for anything during the session, it's being recorded. So don't worry about that. You're welcome to just see yourself out and exit the call, and you'll be able to access this. It'll get posted online a little bit later, and your parent or whoever signed you up, they'll have access to the link for that, okay? Okay, I think that that's all of the housekeeping that I had to do this morning. So before we dive into our activity, Out of curiosity, has anyone here done a supernova program before, or a supernova camp, or even just heard of supernova? You can let me know in the chat. If you remember the name of the camp or of the program that you did, you could share that as well. Awesome. So lots of yeses and lots of nos, and that's all right too, because at the end of our time together this morning, you'll all be able to say yes. We have some people who have done our oceans camp, it looks like. That's awesome. And some different workshops that you've all joined us for before. This is fantastic. All right, so one last bit of housekeeping that I do want to mention. So you will notice that there is a raise hand button down at the bottom where there's those 4 circles, more or less in the middle of your screen. On the far right, there's a raise hand button. We don't have to worry about using that button today because we're not going to be turning our audio on. So if you have questions or when you have things to share, just go ahead and put those in the chat. We don't need to raise our hand this morning, okay? All right, fantastic. So I am going to start sharing some slides now. Just a reminder, my friends, there's still lots of spamming happening in the chat, and I will turn that off if it doesn't stop, and I really don't want to have to do that today, okay? So let's keep that chat on topic, and if it continues being spammed, Mackenzie or I are going to have to turn it off while I'm talking, okay? Let me start sharing my slides. It might take a minute or two for it to show up on your screen. So if it is being slow, just be patient. You can call me Caitlin this morning. And reminder, my friends, let's not spam that chat, okay? Okay, so I hope that you can all see the slide that I'm sharing. If it's not showing up for you, just be patient. It will. I have faith in that. But maybe Mackenzie, you want to just let me know if you can see it? I know all week it's been a little bit slow, so I want to make sure that we can see it.
Yeah, you're good. I can see it.
Okay, thank you, Mac. All right, so today our activity is called Shark Data from the Deep. So we are going to, like I said, we're going to use some ocean science, and we're going to get to talk about some types of technology that can help us to do research, and to do research particularly in the ocean. So we're going to start out talking about how we can track marine animals and why we would want to track marine animals. We're going to talk about the different types of tools that we have that let us do this tracking. And then you are going to get to do your own research. You're going to be collecting firsthand data and getting to look at this data for yourselves. So there is a worksheet that we will be using a little bit later. If you don't have the worksheet printed out, that is okay. All you need if you don't have the worksheet is just a piece of blank paper and something to write with, and I will give you all the rest of the information that you need. If you do have the worksheet printed out, or if you have it on another device, that's awesome as well, because you can just fill the worksheet in as we go through. But don't worry about that yet, because we don't need it quite now. Okay. So I have a really important question, and I'm also going to put this as a poll. So you don't need to worry about using the chat, because I'm going to start a poll. But while I'm starting it, I need you to think about this, because this is something that I think about too often. And I would love your input. So do sharks play the harmonica like this, A, with their mouth, or B, with their gills? So the gills are on the side of the shark. And remember that when water passes over gills of a fish, that's what lets it breathe. Okay, so think about it, take a moment, and I'm gonna start a poll, and you should be able to see the poll on your screen. Teachers, if you are joining us with your class and your class is not signed on to the call, perhaps you can drop a message in the chat and let us know what your class thinks. All right, I'm gonna wait 1 or 2 minutes more and let the rest of you get your answers in. If you're still thinking, I know this one definitely stumps me. Okay, so overwhelmingly, it looks like we think B this morning. We think they play it with their gills. Honestly, my friends, I'm not too sure. I think that the jury is out on this one. There might not be a definite answer, but I really appreciate all of your input. All right, let me stop the poll and we'll get back to our slides. Thanks so much for answering that for me. Okay, so tracking marine animals. So what is this tracking? Why are we doing this? Why is it important? So when I say sharks, or when you think about sharks, what is the first thing that you think about, or what comes to mind when you think about sharks in the ocean? Go ahead and share your answers in the chat. Are there any words or images or thoughts that come to mind when you think about sharks? Okay, yeah. So lots of the answers are that you are sharing don't surprise me. That's kind of what I expected. Lots of you are saying sharp teeth, death, eating people, and unfortunately, that is largely because of how sharks are portrayed in the media. So in movies and in books and pictures, that top picture is maybe how we think about sharks. But in reality, sharks in the ocean are not as dangerous as the media makes them seem. So, really, sharks don't want anything to do with us humans. They don't really want to bother with us. They kind of want to do their own thing. They are just a fish who have gotten a kind of a bad rap in the media. So, sharks in real life are fish that are minding their own business in the ocean. For the most part, they don't want to be harming humans. They do have sharp teeth, but that's just an important feature because they are a top predator in the ocean. They do need to hunt and they do need to find their food, and so they use sharp teeth to do that. But they're not really out to hurt us as humans. They don't really want to care about us. And so if we give sharks space and if we respect sharks, they're gonna give us that same space back. They don't really want to bother with us unless they're feeling perhaps threatened by us. So in ocean science, what we have been trying to do is improve ways that we can do research on sharks, because up until recently, it was really hard to do good research on sharks because they move so far. They have really far migration routes. And so because and they're migrating up and down coastlines, it can be really challenging to do research on this species. And so this is where tracking and tagging comes in. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on today and the importance of that. So why might marine tracking be important for science? So before we go any further in talking about this, does anybody want to share in the chat why you think it could be important in ocean science that we do tracking, not just on sharks, but on other marine animals as well, particularly larger marine animals, the ones that are easier to catch and tag? Why might this be important for science? Or what kind of information could we get from this? Absolutely. So there's lots of fantastic thoughts being shared in the chat right now, and I'm just going to comment on a few of them that I notice as they go by. So definitely tracking their migration patterns is really important, and this is going to help us understand where they are and where they're going. And when we know this, we're also better able to understand what sort of habitats they live in and what habitats they need to survive, so that we can do our part in protecting those habitats. And in turn, that will help to protect and conserve the species. Because every year, so just talking back just about sharks right now, so approximately 100 million sharks are killed each year from overfishing, from finning, and from bycatch, but overfishing is the primary cause of that. And so what is being done, especially in recent years, is there's been a lot of efforts to conserve these animals, to protect the sharks. So over the last 50 years, the shark population has actually declined 70%. So it's 70% smaller than what it was 50 years ago. So that's a big decline. And it's important that we do what we can now to stop that decline and to allow those shark populations to start to increase again, and so they can get their numbers back up. Because what we don't want to see is species of sharks go extinct. And something that I do want to just comment on, I saw a comment come through a couple questions ago when I was asking, what you think about when you think of sharks, and someone said all the different kinds of species. And I did just want to bring that up because there's over 1,000 different species of sharks. So just remember that when we talk about sharks this morning, we're not talking about just one animal species. We're talking about 1,000 different kinds of sharks. So tracking animals can really help us to understand why certain animal deaths are happening and what we can do to prevent them so that we can conserve the species. So all of the photos, except for the memes that we already saw, the rest of the photos that you're going to get to see of people doing the shark tagging. So these are students that I know that went to Dalhousie University, and they got to do this as part of a summer school class. So these photos, I believe all the photos that you're going to get to see are just from this past August and September, and so they're pretty recent. But this is shark research that is happening right off of Halifax, really. The boat, I know for these students in particular, the boat picked them up in Halifax and took them off the coast. So this is happening in the waters right around Nova Scotia. So we're going to talk now a little bit about the different types of tracking that we have. So there's three main types of tracking that I want to mention today, and that is external tagging, acoustic tracking, and satellite tracking. So all of these different types of trackers are going to work a little bit differently, and they're going to give us a little bit of different kinds of information. But external tagging is what happens when researchers will put a tag on the outside. So it's a physical tag that they'll put on the outside of the shark. Often it's put around one of their fins. And so this can be helpful to determine where sharks are moving, how far they're moving. But the challenge with this is, so the tag would have a number on it. So the shark would get a number, and that would be sort of the number that's assigned to it, or its ID tag. And the only way that we can get information about where this shark went is if this shark is caught again. So recapturing the same animal, the same wild animal, especially in the ocean, is really, really hard to do. It happens, but it's rare. It's kind of like searching for a needle in a haystack, because the chance that you're going to fish that same shark again is just so slim because there's so many sharks. And so external tagging can be good, but at the same time, you don't get to see that animal again. So it's not ideal for these ocean animals, unless they're, say, in an enclosed space, which we also don't really want to have the animals in an enclosed space, because optimally we have them out in the wild in their natural habitat. So that's sort of where acoustic tracking and satellite tracking come in. And another word for this is telemetry. So telemetry is sort of the science word that we use for this tracking or this tagging. And so acoustic tracking is and satellite tracking, actually, they both involve using a tracker that's going to send signals. So in acoustic tracking, this is what happens, and this is what you're seeing in these pictures. So the students that were doing this for Dalhousie for part of this class, they were using acoustic tags. And so what happens is they would fish the animal, and in this case, the shark that you're seeing is a blue shark. So they would fish the blue shark, bring it up on board, then they make a little incision or a little cut site in the shark on its underside, and they put in this tag. And the tags are pretty small. They range in size, but for the most part, I believe they all would fit sort of in the palm of your hand. So they're not big. They're just little tags that are going to get put inside the shark. And this doesn't really hurt the shark. It's a really small cut site. I've seen it compared to if you've ever had your ears pierced. It's a little bit painful, but it's quick and you're over it pretty quickly. So it's kind of been equated to that. Of course, we haven't been able to ask the sharks how they really feel, if it does hurt them or if it doesn't hurt them at all. There's lots of argument and different types of information out there about if sharks can or cannot feel pain. And I think that from what I know, there isn't a definite answer on that. There's lots of scientists who think that sharks can feel pain. There's lots of scientists that think that they cannot feel pain. But what is agreed is that tagging doesn't hurt them compared to the kinds of wounds and the kinds of pain that they are getting just from battling other animals in the ocean. So this isn't something that's harming them or hurting them in any way, but it is a way that we as researchers and scientists can work to improve what we know about them so that we can protect them better. So acoustic tracking, what happens, you put the tag in, and there are acoustic monitors scattered about the sea floor. And so when a shark is in range of one of these acoustic monitors, it's going to send pings to that tracker. And those pings are going to be received by the tracker, and then we're able to get the data by looking at that tracker. So we as researchers would talk to the tracker, and the tracker is talking to the animals. And so it's sending these pulses or these signals through the water. And that's how we're able to get information. So when we're doing acoustic tracking, the kinds of information that we would get for the most part is going to be showing us the movement patterns of that animal. But the thing with acoustic tracking is because the animal has to be within range of the acoustic monitor, they're only going to be able to track the movements within a certain range. So we typically get a smaller field of a distance or a range of distance when we use acoustic tracking compared to satellite tracking. So satellite tracking also involves putting a tag right on the animal. I believe that with all satellite tracking though, the tag is put on the outside. So it's not, you don't need to make an incision. You don't need to put it in the shark. You put the satellite tag on the outside of the shark. And what happens with satellite tracking is whenever that animal, and again, I've been saying sharks, but it's important to keep in mind that we do this for all other kinds of marine animals as well. So dolphins, whales, turtles, lots of different types of marine, particularly larger marine animals. We can do this kind of tagging on. So with satellite tracking, when the animal comes to the surface of the water, the satellite tag is going to send a message up to satellites in space. And that's how we're going to be able to get data from that animal. So we're able to track the movements of animals on a broader scale. So if they're moving farther distances, we're able to see the whole picture of this migration route or this movement pattern when we use satellite tracking, just because the satellites are up in space and we don't need to worry about how far the animal is from the monitor like we do with acoustic tagging. So something that I want to just mention while we're looking at this picture, because it's kind of interesting. So you'll see that the shark is on its back. So again, this is from the students at Dalhousie that were doing this in the summer. So when they were tagging, they were doing acoustic tracking. So they were having to make incisions on the underside of the shark. So they would bring the shark up, they would fish it using those rods that you can see in the back. They would bring it up on board, put it on its back, and what happens when the shark is on its back is it goes into what we call a dormant state. So it's kind of like it gets sleepy, it gets drowsy. So it lies on its back, and the reason that they have that hose and they're putting water on it is to keep it so that it can breathe. So remember when we were debating how sharks played the harmonica, I said that when water is passing over the gills of the shark or of any fish, that's how it's able to breathe, because it filters the oxygen out of the water. And so, of course, it's important that we keep water flowing over those gills while it's on board, because we want to, of course, keep the shark breathing and keep it alive while we've got it out of the water. So that's why they've got that hose there, and that's why they're covering it with water while they do the incision. And they only had the sharks up on board briefly. This isn't a long process. Their goal is to do it quickly but correctly, and then get the shark back in the ocean as soon as possible. So with that, it's really important that these marine tags are done properly, because what we don't want is for them to harm the animal. And if they are done correctly, they won't harm the animal. But if they are not done correctly, then they could impact the shark's movements. They might not be able to swim as fast, or might not have the same range of motion that it normally would. And this is going to affect its foraging abilities, or its abilities to find food and to find its prey. And it's also going to affect its abilities to survive, because it could be prey for another predator, for a larger shark usually. So we want to make sure that we're not impacting its ability to survive and its ability to find food and to swim. And again, when we do it properly, when the tags are put in correctly, none of this is an issue. But when it's not done correctly, that's when these become problems. So it's just really important that these scientists that are doing this tagging do it correct, and it's important that they do it correct the first time. Okay. Reminder that we're not spamming the chat. I do see some great questions and comments being shared, so I do really want to leave this on so that you all have the opportunity to keep sharing those comments. But let's keep the spamming out of the chat, okay? I see a question, Mohammed, what is the yellow thing on its belly? So maybe let me just go back to that picture. So that is just like a type of dye that's gonna, or not dye, pardon me, it's a chemical that's gonna clean the area. It has some dye in it. I believe, actually, you know what? I'm not sure exactly what they were using here, but it just sanitizes the area. So that's where they're gonna make the cut site. And it's important that they do it properly. They keep it clean so that it doesn't get infected, because we don't want to send the shark back out into the ocean and risk it getting an infection. Just like if you were to scrape your knee, you would clean it with an antibiotic or with a rubbing alcohol to sanitize the area. That's what that yellow dye is going to do in this case. Okay, my friends, do we have any questions about shark tagging or tracking or sharks or anything that I've talked about so far? Because the next thing we're going to do is switch gears and we're going to start to look at this shark data. But before we do that, I want to make sure that we understand and we don't have any questions about anything so far. So remember, you can put your questions right in the chat. You don't need to raise your hand. Mackenzie might get to your question before I do if she sees it, but I'm just going to take a scroll through and make sure I haven't missed anything. So yeah, the tracker would be waterproof. And something that I actually forgot to mention that might come up is trackers don't have infinite battery life. So we are limited with the tracking devices. So what happens is the acoustic tracking or the acoustic tags that get put in the shark, they can last, I think that some of the best batteries now can last up to 10 years. So 10 years is a long time to be able to track an animal. So that's awesome. But what happens is sometimes these batteries do die. It just happens like with any battery. And in that case, we just will then stop receiving data from that animal. So the tracker stays in the shark because remember, it's really hard to recapture an animal in the wild. It's really unlikely that we would recapture the same animal. So the tracker would stay in the animal, but again, it's not affecting its ability to be a shark and to do all of its shark things. So that's not a concern, but some of the data that you might notice that we're going to start looking at in a few minutes is from many years ago. And so one reason for that could be that the battery in the tag just died. And that's one reason that would explain why we might not be receiving more recent data from some of these animals. So Natalia, I'm seeing a question here about if you tag a shark and it goes down to the bottom, so if you use an acoustic tag, you would be able to track how deep that animal is. If you use a satellite tag, those signals only send when the animal comes up to the surface. So we wouldn't really be able to tell how deep it is using satellite tagging, but definitely using acoustic tracking, you can tell how deep an animal goes. So when they're doing the tagging on the boat, it's going to depend on how big the shark is and what kind of shark it is that they're tracking. So in this case, all of the students at Dalhousie, I believe it took 2 or 3 students working together to do the tagging and to fish it and bring the shark on board. But these are juvenile blue sharks. So blue sharks are they can still get up to 5 or 6 feet. So if you think about how tall your parents are, that's probably around 5 or 6 feet. So that's about as big as a blue shark would get. Other sharks can get up to 60 feet, 60. So that would be, for example, a whale shark, which is the largest shark that we have found. But these blue sharks, because they're typically smaller, they're just going to involve less people. You don't need as many hands and as many bodies to help bring the shark on board. So in this case, I think it was sort of groups of about 3 or 4 students who were doing this tagging on each shark. And the shark isn't flopping around because, remember I said when you put it on its back, it goes dormant. And when you go dormant as an animal, you're kind of sleepy, you're drowsy, so you're really not moving around. Okay. I am going to switch gears and talk about OSearch now, but if you are still typing a question, keep on typing it and Mackenzie or I will get to it as we see it. Reminder, we're not spamming the chat, please, okay? If you have a question or if you have an answer to my question, that's what we want to see in that chat. And all the other comments, we're going to just put on hold for now, okay? All right, so let's talk about OSearch because this is where we're going to get into you doing your own data collection this morning. So OSearch is a nonprofit organization. So they work with a bunch of different scientists and research groups and organizations to track and research sharks as well as other ocean animals. And you're going to get to see that in just a moment. And so they do this tracking in order to look at shark movements, to monitor shark health, to understand the habitats that these sharks and these other animals are living in, and to get a better sense of the population ecology. And when we understand all of these things as conservation scientists and as researchers and ocean scientists, all of these people really care about protecting these animals, and this information is going to help them protect the animals. So I'm going to send you all to the OSearch website. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 5 minutes to explore the website on your own. I'm not going to show you how to use the website. I'm not going to show you what we're doing quite yet. I just want you to have an opportunity because I know when you get there, you're probably going to be a little bit curious and you're going to want to click on some different buttons and see what you can find. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes to have free time to explore the OSearch website, okay? So I will put the link into the chat box. If I can ask you to not put anything in the chat right now so that no one loses this link. And at the end of our 5 minutes, I'm going to ask you to just come on back to the screen that you're looking at now with our call on it. And then I'm going to go through and start talking about the worksheet that you're going to try to fill out during the rest of our session this morning, okay? But take this next 5 minutes. Here's the link. Explore the website for yourselves, and then we'll come back in 5 minutes. If you have to go to the washroom or if you want to go get a drink of water, anything like that, this is a good time to do that. And in 5 minutes, we're going to start talking about the worksheet. And if you have questions, you can keep putting those in the chat and Mackenzie and I will answer them, okay? Okay, so that is 5 minutes. So if you all could just pause what you're looking at on the website, on the OSearch website, and we're going to come back together and I'm going to go through the next few steps with you. But I did see a question come in that I thought was interesting, and I just want to answer it. So Maggie, you're really curious about how many sharks are left in the ocean. And this is something that's hard to measure and hard to count because sharks are moving, sharks are constantly being born, sharks are dying. But scientists have estimated that they think there's about 1 billion sharks in the ocean. So some of those are big, some of those are small, but they've estimated about 1 billion. So that's a lot, but again, we've had a lot of a large population decline, and so we want to do our part in conserving this species, and a large part of this is doing research. So there was another question that I wanted to answer. Oh yes, so someone was asking, I think it was a few minutes ago, but how many sharks I have tagged, I think was the question, and I just wanted to clarify. So I have never had an opportunity to do this shark tagging. I think that it's something that's really, really interesting, but it's not something that I've ever had an opportunity to do. I didn't take the class at Dalhousie that let me do this, unfortunately, but I do know a few students who have. And so that's where these photos came from. And yeah, so this isn't something that I have done, but it is certainly something that is really interesting. And if it's something that you're interested in, there are opportunities out there when you do get to university. If you choose to go to university, there are opportunities like this for you. Okay, so one other thing that's really important that I want to address before we go through the OSearch website together is I just want to remind everyone to please be kind and respectful in the chat. I'm seeing some unkind language being used towards each other, and that's not acceptable, okay? You are all old enough to understand what is kind and what is not kind, and so I just want to remind you all that before you send a message in the chat, please make sure that it's not going to make someone else feel bad and it's not going to be perceived as unkind, okay? All right, let me share. I'm going to share my OSearch website now because I want to show you a couple of the features. Maybe you already found them, and if you did, that's fantastic. But if you didn't, I just want to show you how to set up your screen so that you can go through and start working on the worksheet when you're ready. If you are feeling comfortable with this website and if you have the worksheet and if you feel like you want to just start answering the questions on the worksheet, you're welcome to work at your own pace through this. But you're also more than welcome to follow along step by step as I take you through it. Okay, so go at your own pace here. But I'm going to start out. So this is the website, or this is the page that you would have landed on following the link that I sent you. And I'm going to drop it in the chat once more, just in case you've lost it or for whatever reason you've gotten too far from this page. This is what you would have landed on when you follow that link. So there's a few things that you're going to see. The first thing that's really cool is this right-hand tab that says recent pings. And so remember, the pings are what happens when an animal sends a message to a satellite tracker or to an acoustic tracker or monitor. And so these are some of the most recent pings. So it looks like, so today is January 13th. So today at 5:22 a.m. And you know what, grade 4, 5, 6, I think we're in different time zones right now. So this might actually look differently on your screen. I'm actually not 100% sure. It might say 8:22 on your screen, but either way, this is from this morning. So Pete was the most recent shark to ping. And so what you can see is we can start to see some of the species of these sharks, and we can start to see the length and the weight if it's known. So this is really cool to look at, but this isn't what we're going to look at right now. So I'm going to close the recent pings tab. All right, I'm going to close it. So now I'm looking at the map. And what I start to see is lots of different kinds of little animal pictures. So I see some turtles, I see some whales, I see some dolphins. But what we're looking at today is sharks. So in order to not be distracting and so that I can just see the sharks, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to the right-hand side of my screen where these controls are. So if you're looking at my screen, you can of course see where I'm clicking. If you're looking at your own OSearch screen, what you want to look for is on the right-hand side of the screen, you're going to see 4 black sort of circles and ovals that have different icons inside of them. And in the third one down, you're going to see there's 3 options. There's recent pings, which is what we just looked at, and then there's filters, and then there's animal groups down as the last choice there. So I'm going to click on animal groups. And right now it's set for all, but I just want to look at sharks right now. So I'm going to click on sharks. And now I'm only looking at the sharks that are tagged. And so something that's interesting that I find really interesting when I look at this map is that we don't see any sharks over on the west coast of Canada, in the North Pacific Ocean. And this doesn't mean that there are not sharks there. So there are certainly sharks in this part of the water. There's sharks really anywhere that there is ocean, there's going to be sharks. So there are sharks here, but there's a few reasons for this. Probably it's just likely that OSearch has not partnered with organizations over on the West Coast, but I'm not too sure why that is or you know, if that'll change in the future. But just remember that there are sharks here, even though they're not showing up on the map. So I'm going to close this so that I have my whole map back. So the next thing I'm going to do is I need to find Nova Scotia. So right now I'm really zoomed out. And we know that Nova Scotia is in North America. So I'm going to bring North America over to the middle of my screen. And then I'm going to start to zoom in. So on the right-hand side, again, where all those buttons are, I'm going to hit that plus arrow or that plus button, and that's going to zoom in my screen. And I'm going to keep North America in the middle of my screen so I don't lose it. And now I've zoomed in enough and I can see that I am in Canada. And Nova Scotia, of course, is on the east coast of Canada, way over here. So I'm going to zoom into that area because on your worksheet, and again, if you don't have the worksheet, don't panic. I'm about to put it up on the screen so you'll see what questions you're going to be trying to answer. But I'm going to come over to Nova Scotia because the first question that we're going to ask ourselves is what different types of shark species can we find off the coast of Nova Scotia? So I'm going to zoom in. All right. So what we start to see here is we see some sharks and we also see some circles with numbers. So circles with numbers means that there are, so in this case, this is a number 2. So that means that there's 2 sharks there and they're so close that they've just been grouped together. So I'm going to zoom in even further so that I can see all the sharks and not the numbers. Okay. So now I have got Nova Scotia in the middle of the screen and I start to see all of these sharks. So what happens when you hover over a shark? I'm just going to pick this one here. This is Betsy, and Betsy is a white shark. So the information that I can see when I hover over, I didn't click on it. I just put my mouse over the shark icon and just hovered on it. So I can see the shark's name. I can see the shark species. I can see that the shark is a female. It was 12 foot 7 inches long, and it was 1,400 pounds. And I can also see that the last time it pinged in this location was on July 22nd, 2018. So that's, of course, almost 4 years ago. And so there's many reasons for this. One reason could be that the acoustic tracker, the battery died. One reason might be that the animal is no longer alive. That's the reality of sharks in the ocean and wild animals anywhere. It could have died, hopefully not, but we do know that the ping from this wasn't super recent, but that's okay because it's still interesting. When I click on the shark, so remember right now I'm just hovering, but when I click onto it, I'm going to get to see more information. So now I'm looking at the migration route. So remember I said that sharks, they move really far, and that's something that makes it hard to study them because they move. So what we see, this yellow line, that's the migration route. And we can see if I zoom in a little more. So if you are looking at my screen still and following along, hopefully it's a little bit bigger for you there. So we can see based on where these pings were, the different migration routes. So it looks like Betsy made this migration route probably every year. They usually go south during the winter, and then they come up during the summer and fall to Nova Scotia, particularly these white sharks in the Atlantic Ocean. This is a very common migration route for sharks that we find off the coast of Nova Scotia. So we can see this route that Betsy went. We can see she went all the way down to the Mexico Basin in the Gulf of Mexico. So that's a long way to swim. And she did that every year for a few years. So that's really interesting. Something else we can see when we click on this is we can see how old the shark was when it was tagged, and we can also see the date that it was tagged. So Betsy was first tagged in 2013. And the last ping was from 2018. So we got 5 years of data from that tag. So that's really impressive. And that's really important when we talk about shark research. Okay, so that is the important parts of the website so that you can answer the first question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to share what the worksheet looks like. So if you don't have the worksheet, that's okay, because I'm going to show you what questions you're answering. Okay, let me start sharing our slides again. Okay, so this is, so the question we're asking is, what species of sharks are found around Nova Scotia? And this is how you're going to set up your table. So if you don't have the worksheet, the people that do have the worksheet, this is what they're looking at. So on your blank piece of paper, you can set it up so that you have a table somewhat like this one. So what you're going to do is you're going to find Nova Scotia. That's step one, and that might be the hardest step of the day, but you're going to find Nova Scotia. And then you're going to find two sharks. So I clicked on Betsy. Maybe you want to click on Betsy, but maybe you want to use a different shark. That's okay too. All you have to do is find the shark's name and find what species it is. And to find the species, you don't even have to click. You can just hover. So I'm going to give you a few minutes now to find Nova Scotia and then find two sharks. And if you have already found your two sharks and you are crushing this and you're done and you're ready to move on, what I want you to do is find two more sharks. So you'll have a total of 4 sharks around Nova Scotia, because the more data that we can collect as researchers, the better information we have, the more confident we can be in it. So if you're done your 2, that's awesome. Find some more. My fellow researchers, if you still cannot find Nova Scotia, don't worry about it too much. Wherever you are on the map, try to figure out where you are, and then maybe just write that down on your paper or on your worksheet if you have one, so that you remember where you were doing your research and where you were collecting your data. But that's okay if you can't find Nova Scotia. You can look somewhere else. And if you don't have the worksheet, remember you can just be filling out the same information right onto any piece of paper that you have. I'm going to put the link for the tracker back into the chat in case anybody has lost it and you need to go back to the main page. So if you're looking for sharks in Canada, they're going to be on the east coast. So around Nova Scotia and Newfoundland is where you're going to find them in Canada. So you want to make sure that you're looking in the Atlantic Ocean for them. For question one, we're just looking at name and species. In a couple minutes, I'm going to switch and I'm going to take you through answering question two. So if you're ready to move on, hold tight or collect some data for a few more sharks, and then we'll move on to that together. But for now, just name and species. And just a reminder, we're going to go until about 10:30. So we'll wrap up in the next 20 minutes or so. But remember, if you do have to leave before then, this is being recorded and you'll be able to watch it later if you do want to come back and finish the activity. If you're still not able, Jacob, it looks like you're having a hard time finding the sharks. So make sure that you have your animal groups set so that you can see sharks. So try clicking over and selecting just sharks, and maybe let me know if you're still having a challenge seeing them. Okay, Jacob, can you go, maybe just try going to the website again? It should show you sharks. So try maybe just going back to the homepage and starting from the start, and hopefully you're able to see sharks then. So William, I see you have a question about why we're seeing so many white sharks around Nova Scotia. So while you folks are working on getting this data, I'm just going to touch on this because likely what you're observing, and I know I saw a couple of you share this observation in the chat already, is we are seeing a lot of white sharks off the coast of Nova Scotia. So there are other sharks, just like you said, Will, there are other sharks in the Atlantic Ocean, particularly in the North Atlantic around Nova Scotia. But recently, we've been seeing a lot of white sharks coming up into this region. And so I think one reason for there being so many sharks, so many white sharks that are tagged, is because there's a lot of them. So when we have a lot of one species, it's more likely that we're going to be tagging those animals. It also may have to do with the research organizations that are going out and doing this research. They may be tracking, they may specifically be looking for white sharks. So there's a couple of reasons why that could be, but there are a lot in recent years, particularly this past fall. We had a lot of white sharks up in Nova Scotia, and scientists think that the reason for that is because the waters off the coast of Nova Scotia were a really great, they called it like a feeding frenzy. It was a really great feeding ground for these white sharks. So white sharks mostly eat pinnipeds. So those are like seals, sea lions. So the food that they like to eat, these pinnipeds, these seals and sea lions, there was a lot of them in the North Atlantic, so in the waters off of Nova Scotia. And so they were all coming up to eat because there was so much food. So that's why in the summer and into the fall this past year, we saw so many, and in past years as well, we see so many white sharks make this migration up to eat. And then when it gets cold, they go back down south for the winter and through the spring. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to switch to question number 2 now, because I think that hopefully you've all had a chance to at least get one shark down, but if not, you can always come back and collect that information. So what we're going to look at now and for the rest of our time together this morning is how do shark species change in warm and cold water? So give me just a moment to start sharing my OSearch screen again, because I want to show you one more website feature that's going to help you out to answer this question. Okay, so I'm seeing that lots of you have done more than 2, so that's awesome. We, as researchers, always want to collect as much information as we can. So what I'm going to do, and what I would encourage all of you to do on your screen as well, oops, I'm going to go back, so I'm just looking at sharks. Okay, so if you're zoomed in to Nova Scotia, zoom out so that you're looking at a larger area. If you want to zoom all the way out, you can do that. But I want you to zoom out so that you can see a large part of the globe. And what you're going to do is you're going to add a heat layer so that you can see the water temperature. So the way that you're going to do this, again, on the right-hand side of your screen, where those black circles and ovals are, down at the bottommost circle, if you hover over it, it says Map Layers. And when you click on Map Layers, it's going to open up this tab. And at the top, it says Ocean Base, which is the default layer. So that's what you are probably looking at now, but maybe you've already found this. What I encourage you all to do is to click on Sea Surface Temperature. So that's the second option down from the top. And when you click on Sea Surface Temperature, you're going to see this heat map. And so blue, and particularly dark blue, is going to be getting into cold waters. And then as you get towards the equator, so the equator is that line around the middle of our globe where it is the hottest. So of course, when the air is hot, the water is also going to be warmest there. So this red-orange area, this band or stripe through the middle, that's the equator. That's where the water is warmest. So remember, the question that we're going to try to answer now is how do shark species change in warm versus cold water? So what you're going to do is you're going to find any area close to the equator. So it doesn't have to be Nova Scotia or south of Nova Scotia at the equator. It can be anywhere in the world at the equator. And what you're going to do is you want to zoom in. So using that plus button, again, you'll zoom back in to the equator. And then I'm going to pick a shark, any shark, and you're going to do the same thing at the equator. or in that red-orange area. So for example, I have found Buzz. Buzz is a blue shark. He is a male that is 8 feet 4 inches when he was captured for tagging, and he was 235 pounds. And so what you'll do is you're going to record, again, you'll record the name. So Buzz in this case, the species type was a blue shark. He was 8 feet 4 inches, and he's at the equator. And then what you're going to do is you're going to find another shark at the equator. So again, in this orange red area, and you'll collect the same information. Then, and remember, if you don't have the worksheet, don't panic, because I'm going to share the table in just a minute, so you know what information you're trying to fill in. So what you want to do is choose, are you going to go north or are you going to go south? So north is up, south is down. Doesn't matter to me, but pick a direction and go that way. And you're going to go up to cooler waters. So you're going to go and you're going to collect information for a third shark that's maybe in this yellow, or maybe even getting into this sort of turquoisey area. So I've decided to go north here. And then I would pick a shark. Maybe I'd pick this shark, and this is Thomas. And Thomas is also a blue shark, interestingly enough. So Thomas would be a shark that's in a little bit cooler waters north of the equator. And then the last thing I would do to find my fourth shark is go even more north. And so remember, as I'm going more north, or maybe you're going more south, whichever you want. But what you're looking at is how the shark species change as you get from that warm water into cooler water. So let me share the table if you don't have the worksheet so that you can follow along and fill it in. But I'm going to give you really the rest of our session to try to fill in this table here. And if you're done, maybe just let me know in the chat so that I can keep an eye on who is done and where we're at with this. But this is sort of the end of our worksheet that we're going to go through together. Just a reminder, teachers, if you're still here, and while you're still here, if you could let us know in the chat, if you could just send us a quick message with how many students you have that are signing in. If you don't have them signed in on their own computers, that would be much appreciated. If you want to collect weight and if you want to collect other information, you're more than welcome to collect that data as well, for sure. So the recording, for those of you who are curious, the recording will be available on YouTube, but later on today or tomorrow, we'll post it so you can go back and watch it there. So William, you're curious about the naming. So OSearch names the sharks, or the researchers who collect the data and do the tagging on these sharks. They name them. I think it's more just for fun, because it's more exciting to track a shark that has a name rather than, you know, shark 7513. So they name it. It's kind of arbitrary or random. I don't know how they choose names. I'm sure they have different ways that they do that. But sometimes they might not know the species. Maybe it's unclear when they do the tracking what kind of species it is. I think there's probably a few reasons why they might not record the species, or they don't know what species. And just a reminder, so if you're looking for the temperature map layer, if you go to, so Mackenzie just shared the link again that's going to send you to that landing page. On the right-hand side, where those black icons are down at the very bottom, the bottommost circle, you should be able to see two squares that are stacked on top of each other, and that is your map layers button. So when you click on that, and it looks like Mackenzie has just sent you the link right to that. So hopefully when you click on that link, you should see the options. Up at the top is where you're gonna select sea surface temperature. So probably you're looking at ocean base and you wanna click on sea surface temperature. And if you can't find it, that's okay, because remember that the equator is the middle. So if you go, if you zoom out and then zoom into the middle of the globe, you'll be at the equator. And you know that if you work north or south, either way, you're gonna get into colder waters. All right, so it looks like some of you are done, and that's fantastic. So perhaps for those of you who are done, do you want to share some observations that you've made while you've done this tracking or while you've collected this data about what kind of species you're seeing? So are you seeing the same species at the equator as you saw in colder waters? Are you seeing different species? Let's share some of your findings with your fellow researchers that are on this call. So some initial observations that are being shared is that you are seeing lots of tiger sharks in warm waters. So certainly tiger sharks enjoy living in warm water. So that makes sense and that's expected. So that's awesome that you are seeing those observations. And lots of you are seeing those observations, which means that this data is even more valid and we can really rely on it. And another observation that it looks like some of you are making is that as you are moving into the colder waters, you are seeing different species. So again, that is, I think, what we would expect, because just like animals that we have on land, some of them are better acclimatized to live in warmer climates and some of them live in colder climates. And usually when you're an animal, you're gonna live in one or the other. And so maybe you migrate so that you can kind of follow that warm climate. But usually you don't thrive or do your best in both warm and cold. Typically as animals, we're gonna have one climate that we thrive in, depending on what our adaptations are and depending on the kind of animal that we are. Okay, so it sounds like lots of you are getting through this table, so that's fantastic. I'm gonna start to wrap up our call this morning. And I just want to share with you one more fun bit of information. So if you really enjoyed talking about sharks today, and if you're really interested in shark research, Supernova recently has started a podcast. So also if you're interested in podcasts, this is interesting for you as well. So Supernova recently started and launched our own podcast. And every other week, we post episodes that feature different scientists and different people working in all different kinds of fields of STEM. And they share what they do. And particularly, so a few weeks ago, we had a podcast with a student from Dalhousie who has done research and who has actually had the opportunity to go out and do this shark tagging. So I'm going to share a link in the chat right now that's going to take you to more information about Supernova's podcast. So if this is something that you want to check out, this particular podcast about sharks, you would get to hear more and learn more. There's some really fun shark facts in this podcast. But if you're not interested in sharks, that's okay too, because every episode is going to talk about something different related to science. And so definitely check it out if you are interested in it. And in addition to the podcast, every episode has different activities that go along with it. So this might be something that could be fun for you to check out either with your class or maybe with your family at home. So we are at the end of our time together this morning. So thank you all so much for spending the last hour and a half with me and with us at Supernova. We really enjoyed having you join us. I hope that you all had fun. I hope that you learned something new. At the very least, I hope that you really thought about how sharks play the harmonica, because truly it's a question that I have. When you're ready to sign out, you can go ahead and exit the call. And if you have any final questions, go ahead, drop those in the chat, and we will answer them as best as we can. Thank you, everyone.